Today we are going to discuss assets markets. If you remember, in our two preceding videos of the current series, that is ISLM series, we discussed aggregate demand and the goods market and the commodity market. Here we turn to assets markets, and assets markets are basically markets in which money, bonds, stocks, houses, and other forms of assets or wealth are traded. Uh, Up to this, actually, we have ignored the role of those markets, which can affect the level of income. And so, here in part 3, we are actually introducing some of the asset markets. Some of them. Actually, you will understand, you will know that uh, ultimately we will discuss only money market. But why we will discuss only money market? Why this is sufficient to understand the assets markets? For the purpose of understanding the economy, that you will learn here. And so let's proceed. Okay. Okay, let's start again. Actually, I was saying that in terms of different definitions, actually we divide money. Uh, we define money differently. We learn that there is something called M1, M2, M3, M4, and money basically defined in terms of their liquidity, how liquid the money is. But we are not interested in that part at this moment. So for the time being, let's assume that money is something which is, if you hold them, maybe you are holding them for making regular transactions, but when you hold them, when this is in your pocket, in your wallet, they're not going to earn you anything. Okay, so money is basically something which is not going to earn any interest. And then the second part, if you keep your financial asset in terms of bond, if you buy bond, then you can earn something. Bond is basically a promise, okay, a promise to pay its holder certain agreed upon amount of money at specified dates in the future. That means if you buy a bond, it promises you to pay something in the future. And there are different types of bonds also. One can be a fixed maturity bond. Say for example, if you buy a bond at 100 rupees now, the promise may be like this: after 7 years you will get 200 rupees. Okay, just like, have you heard about, in your from your parents, you can ask, like পোস্ট অফিস থেকে দেখবে, অনেকে বাই করেন লাইক কিষাণ বিকাশ পত্র. ওকে, if you buy কিষাণ বিকাশ পত্র of 5,000 say amount for today, then after মানে 7.5 বছর বা 8 বছর, এটা ওটা লেখা থাকে ওখানে, এটা চেঞ্জও করে তো, বলা থাকে যে 8 বছর পরে আপনি 5,000 টাকাটা আপনার 10,000 টাকা হয়ে যাবে. দিস ইজ আ বন্ড, দিস ইজ ওয়ান টাইপ অফ বন্ড. ওকে, and another can be, if you buy say a bond worth rupees 1,000 now today, then it may promise you to pay 10 rupees, sorry, 100 rupees each year. Okay, that is 10%, 100 rupees each year. That is called bonds yield each year. And then after say 10 years, you will get 1,200 rupees, this kind of a bond. Okay, this is not a fixed maturity bond. Yeah, it's a fixed maturity bond, but then it is giving you some some yields at regular interval, and then at the end of the maturity, at the end of the, I mean, at maturity, it's giving you some money. And there are bonds which is called perpetual bonds also, where you buy something and then you will get a fixed amount of money, say 100 rupees, perpetually. Perpetually means so long as you hold the bond, you will get that money. You can sell the bond anytime at market price. Whatever price is going on that at that moment, you can sell them in the market. So this is how bond works. But for the time being, let's assume that you will learn about bond in, as I was saying, when you will go through that dedicated chapter on money supply and money demand, you'll learn about money and bond in great detail. But for the time being, let's assume it, let's understand it, money and bond in this way. You have total financial wealth, you divide them into two parts. One part is money and another part is bond. If you hold money, if you hold some part of your financial assets in terms of money, then you are going to earn nothing, because that part is only made for transaction. And the second, if you buy bond, you earn something, maybe a return R from that bond. Okay, so that's how we divide financial assets into money. And then I was telling you in our introductory slide that fortunately we don't have to discuss both the markets, okay, money market and bond market. And I will explain, I will explain why this is so. I mean, if we can understand the money market, if we discuss the money market, automatically we can understand the bond market as well. So for that, let's understand how they are related. So this is called the wealth budget constant. So let's think about the demand for, demand for wealth in different forms, because there are wealth in two forms here. So whatever wealth I can demand is, maybe it is money demand, or my demand for bond holding. So my demand for bond holding is called DB, and my demand for money is when it is divided by price level, because everything is, as you know, that when we divide something by price level, this is the real value, right? Just like when we divided y by p, that is GDP by price, it was small y denoted as real income or real GDP. Just like that, if your total money demand is M, and if you divide that MD is your total money demand, if you divide that by price level of the economy, then this is called demand for real money or demand for real balances. That is termed as demand for real balances, and that is denoted here as L. So your total demand is basically L plus DB. That is equal to your total wealth, okay, of an individual. And from the supply side, you can say that total supply is your bond supply. This is your supply of bond. SB is supply of bond, and this is the total supply of money. And from the supply side, this is also equal to, identically equal to your total wealth. Now, from equation 1 and from equation 2, you can equate Wn by P from here and Wn by P from here. So basically what you are getting is L plus DB equal to M by P plus SB. And then if you rearrange term, you can write it in this way: L minus M by P plus DB minus SB, okay, because they are equal. So just equate L plus DB equal to M bar by P plus SB, and then you can write it this way, okay, L minus M by P plus DB minus SB identically equal to 0, because their identity, that we are getting it from two identities. So I'm rewriting it here in this page. So this is L minus M by P. And what is that? That means this is the demand for money, the demand for real balance, okay, remember that, and that is the supply of money. And from here you can clearly say that if this L equal to M by P, that means what? That means if your sorry, just a moment. Okay, that means if your demand for money, DD, demand for money is equal to your supply of money, M by P equal to SS. That means if L is equal to M by P, then this part will be equal to 0, right? This part will be equal to 0. And if this part is equal to 0, then automatically DB minus SB will be equal to 0. That means DB will be equal to SB. That means what? That means when demand for money is equal to supply of money means what? Means the money market is in equilibrium. This is in equilibrium. So when money market is in equilibrium, the bond market is automatically in equilibrium. Because from this equation, you can clearly say, from this, from this equation or this identity, I would say, from this identity, you can clearly say that if your L is equal to M by P, that is your demand for money is equal to supply of money. That means, in other words, if the money market is in equilibrium, then automatically DB is equal to SB, that is demand for bond is equal to supply of bond. So the bond market also is in equilibrium. And therefore, as I was telling you, fortunately, we don't need to discuss both the markets. So therefore, we are writing here, we can therefore fully discuss the assets market by concentrating our attention on the money market only. So we are going to discuss the money market only, because by now we know from the wealth constraint, by now we know that whenever there is equilibrium in the money market, the bond market will be in equilibrium automatically from the wealth constraint. And therefore we are now turning our attention to the money market. We will learn about bond market in great detail, as I was saying, in our money demand, money supply chapter. But for the time being, we can ignore the bond market for the time being, because as we can see from this equation, that if there is equilibrium, when the money market is in equilibrium, L equal to M by P, the bond market too is in equilibrium, DB equal to SB. So from the next slide, we are going to discuss the money market. Okay. So let's talk about the money market. Okay. As in any other market, uh, in, in a money market also, you will have a demand side and a supply side. So let's talk about the supply side first, because that's simple to understand. What is money supply? Okay, who is controlling money supply? Money supply is basically money in circulation. Okay, money in circulation means your currency, cash money plus checkable deposits. Okay, there is though distinction between different types of money. You will learn about them in your money supply chapter. There are concepts like M1, M2, M3, M4, different types of money. I mean, ranging from most liquid to very less liquid money supply. But for the time being, let's assume that money for our purpose, we are defining something which can be used as medium of exchange. And so whatever money we have in circulation in terms of currency plus checkable deposits are uh, which can be used issuing checks. So because you can use checks to make transactions also, therefore they are also treated as money. So this is basically money supply. And in an economy, the money supply is basically determined by the central bank of a country. Okay, central bank means like in our case it is Reserve Bank of India. So you will also learn about these functions of central bank in great details in that particular money supply chapter. But for the time being, for us, because we are assuming that money supply is determined by a central bank, CB, so for our model, this money supply is exogenously given. Okay, this is exogenously given because this is not determined within the model, and therefore it's simple for us to understand that money supply is basically given from outside, that is M is equal to M bar. In real terms it is M bar by P, because M bar is the money supply in nominal value and P is the price level of the economy. Because we are measuring everything in terms of real value, so my money supply is basically M bar by P. Okay, so supply side is, I mean, understanding supply side is relatively easy because we are assuming a very simplistic, we are taking a very simplistic assumption that money supply is just a policy variable, and therefore this is basically determined uh, by some authority. I mean, as I have mentioned, it is basically central bank of a country, or maybe in consultation with the government also. So basically that is a policy variable for us, and because that's a policy variable, just like government expenditure. Remember, in our product market case, because government expenditure was determined by the government, it was a policy variable. So we have assumed in that case that G was equal to G bar. Similarly, M bar, M is money supply, is basically equal to M bar. So money supply is basically real terms, money supply is M bar by P. So that's the supply side. So again, it's to draw the graph, it would be simple, because if you measure say M this side, okay, I will talk about the graph later on, because I will have to explain what I am measuring on the horizontal axis and what I am measuring on the vertical axis. So I'll talk about that in the next slide maybe. But let's concentrate on the demand for money. What do you mean by demand for money? Demand for money is basically, by demand for money, we basically means why people hold money. Okay, so it's not, I mean, just like any in a commodity market, it's easy to understand the relationship, the demand relationship against price, because there is a cost associated with buying something. So that is the price of a commodity, and therefore when you buy something, you'll have to pay that price. It's not that straightforward when we talk about demand for money. So we we discuss demand for money from a different, we use a different approach. We ask the question why people do hold money, why they should demand money. There are three purposes of demanding money, why you should demand money. Remember two things. One, whatever is your wealth, you can divide it into money, and second part is bond. And remember it also, I mean, you'll have to remember also that if you hold money, you are not going to earn anything. But if you hold bond, if you buy bond, you can earn some interest, say R. So whenever you are holding money, so whenever you are basically holding money, some interest is foregone by holding that amount of money. So for example, if you hold 1000 rupees as cash in your pocket, then basically you are not using that money to buy a bond. So that means there is a cost associated with holding that money. And that cost is basically not a direct cost, but that's an opportunity cost. Basically, you could have invested, or you could have bought a bond using that 1000 rupees, and maybe you could have earned maybe 10% of that. If the rate of return is just 10%, you could have earned 100 rupees investing in that bond or buying that bond. So what is the cost of holding money? The cost is basically 100 rupees. Okay, that rate of interest is the cost of holding money. So remember that in mind, that whenever you hold money, M, you lose something. You are basically foregoing a rate of interest for that. So R is basically the cost of holding money. That is not a direct cost, but that is basically opportunity cost. So if I draw a graph to explain this, if I measure money demand here, and then rate of interest here, then what I am saying is, if the rate of interest is high, that means your cost of holding money is high, so therefore you will hold less money. If rate of interest decreases, then the cost of holding money decreases, so you will hold more money. Okay, so that's the relationship. This is called speculative demand for money, LR. L is a function of rate of interest, which is downward sloping, so L prime is basically less than 0. So that is basically what is called speculative demand. So people hold money for speculative purpose. Basically, there is uncertainty in the bond market, and so there is a there is there is a big literature on that, why people hold money for speculative purpose. That is basically, there is uncertainty. Maybe you are holding some money because you don't want to buy bonds today. Okay, so maybe you are holding that up. Maybe you think that bond price will fall, and therefore you are holding some money for that purpose. And you are waiting for a correct opportunity, a right opportunity to get into the bond market. But whatever be the reason, if rate of interest increases, remember this relationship. When rate of interest increases, that means your cost of holding money is increases, and therefore you will try to hold less amount of money because your cost is increasing, and therefore you will try to less amount of money. So the relationship is negative. So there are other reasons why you hold money. In fact, the primary reason why you hold money is basically transactionary motive. You hold money because you want to make transactions. You want to buy goods and services. You want to buy and sell goods and services. Whoever you are, you need to make transactions. Like, you want to buy your necessities, you want to buy luxuries, whatever you want to buy, and for that you need money, because money is the medium of exchange. That is called transactionary motive. Okay, and and remember, if your income is higher, then your transactions will be also higher, right? Because more richer you are, your average transaction is higher. Think of a situation where, think of an individual whose monthly income is 10,000 rupees, and compare that individual with another individual whose monthly income is 1,000 rupees. What do you think? Whose transactions will be higher? Definitely the person with higher income. So if higher income means higher transactions, therefore you would like to hold more money for making higher transactions. Therefore, this is called transactionary demand for money, and denoted as K, which is a function of income, because if income increases, that means your transaction also increases, and therefore you want to hold more money. So K prime, in this case, transactional demand for money, is greater than 0. Okay, and there is another motive why you hold money, is that is called precautionary motive. You hold some money because uh, to meet some emergencies also. Say for example, you don't know what will happen to the banking system. Maybe maybe the ATM will remain closed, maybe there will be a strike, maybe there will be some natural calamities, and you always prepare yourself for that, and so you always keep some money for that purpose, which we call precautionary demand for money. But this precautionary demand for money behaves exactly like transaction demand for money, so we can club them together and we can call it KY. Okay, so basically those two, transaction demand for money and precautionary demand for money, they can be clubbed together to form a transaction demand for money. We can call it a transaction demand for money, where we can denote it K, which is a function of Y, with K prime greater than 0. And then we have speculative demand for money, that is a negative function of rate of interest, where we have this is equal to L as a function of R, where L prime less than 0. So basically what we are getting, I mean, if we don't use an additive function, you can write it like this. Your money demand MD is a function of two things, small m, a function of Y and R. There are two things which will determine money demand. Money demand is positively associated with Y but negatively associated with R. Okay, so this is my money demand function in real terms, because we are measuring everything in real terms. So this is basically m by p d. Okay, so this is demand. That means this is equal to, you can write it LR plus KY, speculative demand for money plus transaction demand for money, which is in total, you can write it in this way also. M as a function of rate of interest and income, where it is negatively associated with rate of interest and positively associated with income. So with this information, we can now draw the money demand and money supply function in the next slide, or the money demand curve and the money supply curve. Remember this. Okay, so this is the equilibrium condition. Money demand is equal to money supply, because this is in any market. Whenever you talk about a market, the equilibrium condition is supply is equal to demand. So supply was equal to m bar by p, that was exogenously given, because that was a policy variable. And as we have already explained, this is the demand consisting of transaction and demand and speculative demand. So supply is equal to demand. So the money market will be in equilibrium when your money supply is exactly equal to money demand. So we are measuring real money balance here. Small m means this is basically equal to m by p. Okay, so this is basically equal to m by p. Capital M by p is basically equal to small m. So you are measuring money demand and money supply along the horizontal axis, and you are measuring rate of interest along the vertical axis. Because money supply is given from outside, so whatever be your rate of interest, be it higher or lower, or whatever be your rate of interest, your money supply is constant here. This is your money supply, and this basically is determined by, that amount is basically determined by the central bank of a country. If it decides to increase money supply, then this curve will shift rightward. If it decides to decrease money supply, then it will shift leftward. Okay, that we will do when we will be discussing the comparative statics, when we will be discussing different policies. But for the time being, let's assume that this is money supply. And as you know, money demand is a function of rate of interest and income. We cannot draw both of them in one graph. As you know, whenever we have a function which is function of two variables, we draw it with respect to one variable, and then the second variable is used as a shifting parameter. So here what we are assuming is we are drawing money demand as a function of rate of interest, because this is negatively drawn, this is negative sloping. Okay, and with a given level of income y. Now if you increase income, what will happen? If you increase income, then because along the curve we have taken the change with respect to R. So if you increase income, then the demand curve will shift rightward like this. So if this is MRY0, then you can write this is MR Y1, where Y1 is greater than Y0. Because transaction and demand for money, remember the relationship K prime is greater than 0. K prime is greater than 0, remember that relationship. Okay, K prime is greater than 0. So whenever there is an increase in income, there will be more demand. It's just like any other demand curve. Because remember, in our case of a commodity market also, what was the demand curve? The demand curve was, demand was a function of price and income, right? That was the demand curve. So when we draw a demand curve, we measure X along the horizontal axis and say P along the vertical axis, and the demand curve is downward sloping. Like, what does that mean? That means if the price is higher, demand is lower. If the price is lower, demand is higher. So in that case, along the demand curve, you are basically measuring a change in price and shift in demand and change in demand. Okay, but whenever there is an increase in income, if this is a normal good, because increase in income will have an increase in will have an impact, positive impact on increase on demand. So you can capture that in terms of a shift, in terms of shifting of the demand curve. It's exactly the same here as well, because remember, R is basically the price of money. Okay, the cost associated with money holding. It's like P. It's like P. Okay, it's not exactly P, but it's like P. It's opportunity cost. So the demand curve is basically downward sloping like that, like this. So the demand curve is downward sloping, but it's also a function of income. So if income increases, demand also increases. That is captured in terms of a you know shifting. Whenever we have this kind of a this kind of a function where there are two variables, we draw with respect to one variable, and then the second variable is actually considered as the shifting variable. So with this, the money market equilibrium is determined here where the demand is equal to supply, and where the demand is equal to supply, that's m bar by p, that's given m bar by p. So given m bar by p, what is happening here, rate of interest is at I. Okay. Okay. Now, if the central bank decides to increase money supply, what will happen? Okay. If the money supply increases, what will happen? The rate of interest will fall. It's just like any other market, because if supply increases, given demand, price will fall. Here also, what is happening? If supply increases, given money demand, price is falling. Okay. But we are not interested in that comparative statics at this moment. What will happen if money supply increases, and similarly, if money supply falls, rate of interest will increase. But we are interested to find out the LM curve, as I was saying. We will discuss about the LM curve. Why we are talking about another curve, just like the IS curve? Remember, in case of product market, we had a situation where there was one equation with two unknowns. The product market equilibrium condition, if you remember that, y was equal to c plus IR. I was a function of rate of interest and G bar. In that equation, there was only one, that was one equation, but there were two unknowns, y and r. Similarly, here also, we have another equation with two unknowns, same two unknowns, r and y. Okay, so again, you cannot solve this. I don't want to discuss the same problem again and again, but remember the same problem here as well. This is one equation with two unknowns, so we cannot have any particular equilibrium point, but we can have different combinations of r and y which will satisfy this equilibrium condition, just like IS curve. R0, Y0, R1, Y1, R2, Y2, just like IS curve. We have to know what are those, equilibrium points, and when we join those equilibrium points, we get a curve which is called LM curve. In case of product market, it was called IS curve or product market equilibrium schedule. In this case, it will be called LM curve, the money market equilibrium schedule. So how to derive that? The derivation is pretty simple. The derivation is pretty simple in this way. Okay, let's talk about the demand curve first. Say the initial demand curve is here. Okay, this is the initial demand curve, and this is basically the money demand function. This is the initial money demand function, and so this is your equilibrium point E0. This is the equilibrium point, and this is equilibrium rate of interest R0. You start with 1 y equal to y0. So remember, because I told you in the previous slide, to draw a money demand function, you will have to have a given amount of income, because you are drawing that money demand function with a given amount of income. Basically, the demand function is, you are drawing the demand function with respect to money demand and rate of interest with a specific value of money income, with a specific value of real income. Okay, so this is your money supply, this is your money demand function, this is your equilibrium, so this is your initial rate of interest. Now, if you increase real income, what will happen? Increase in real income means what? As income increases, transaction and demand for money will increase. So therefore, the demand curve will shift rightward, just like any other demand curve. So if demand curve shifts rightward, the new equilibrium is at E1. So with respect to another y equal to y1, where y1 greater than y0, you have another equilibrium point R1, another equilibrium point E1 corresponding to another rate of interest, which is R1. So if you plot that, just using the same logic as we did in case of IS curve. So with respect to y0, the equilibrium point is E0 and the rate of interest is R0. With respect to y1, the equilibrium point is E1 and the new rate of interest is R1. Here, as you can see, with respect to a higher y at y0, you are having a higher rate of interest R at R1. And if you join those 2 points, you get a curve, and there are numerous points. All of them are money market equilibrium conditions. All of them satisfy money market equilibrium conditions. So when you join all those points, the locus of all points is called the money market equilibrium schedule, or LM curve. And as you can see from here, the LM curve is upward rising, because corresponding to a higher value of y, you are getting a higher value of r. In case of IS curve, it was an opposite relationship. With respect to higher value of r, we were getting lower value of y, or with respect to higher value of y, we were getting lower value of r. But here the relationship is positive. Why this is positive? Let's understand that. Okay, let's think of a situation. Let's consider this. We have done that. We have explained that graphically, but let's try to understand why LM curve is upward rising intuitively. So let's start with any R0 Y0 combination. Let's start with R0 and Y0, the initial one. Now, and that is here. So the graph is here. Corresponding graph is here. So this is R0, and you start with R0, and there is one Y0. So you have a point which is here. That is the point. That is the initial point. Now you increase y. What will happen? As you increase y from y0 to y1 here, you are increasing y from y0 to y1. What is happening? Remember, transaction demand for money is a function of income and a positive function of income. So K will increase. So money demand will increase. Okay. So this part will increase. Transaction demand for money will increase. But remember, money supply is constant. You cannot increase that one, because that's a policy variable. From the model's point of view, this is constant. So to bring back equilibrium, because this has increased, to bring the equilibrium back, you will have to lower LR. It has increased by say 100 rupees. Then you will have to lower LR by 100 rupees. Otherwise, you cannot bring back the equilibrium. To lower LR, you will have to raise R to say R1. Why? Because the relationship is negative. L and R, they are negatively related. So whenever there is an increase in Y, transaction demand for money will increase, and to bring back equilibrium, speculative demand for money should fall, and to lower speculative demand for money, you will have to raise R, because the relationship here is negative. So corresponding to a higher value of Y, you will have to have a higher value of R. Let's say R1. Then there are 2 equilibrium points. If you join those equilibrium points, you get a curve which is the money market equilibrium schedule, or LM curve. This is how you derive LM curve from money market equilibrium condition. You can do the same using another kind of graph. It's simple. So instead of drawing the money demand function with respect to R, because I told you, if there are 2 variables affecting one function, say money demand is a function of R and Y. In the previous slide, we have drawn. We were using money demand function against rate of interest. Y was treated as the shifting variable. Here we are drawing money demand against income, like this, and R is treated as a shifting variable, right? So because transaction demand for money is a function of pricing function of income, so here in this case, this is a upward rising function when you draw M against Y, not against R. Now if R is at R0, this is the money demand function. If you lower R, then if you increase R, then money demand will fall. So there will be a leftward shift. If you lower R, then money demand will shift rightward. So there will be a rightward shift. So let's start with M equal M as a function of income with R equal to R0. So this is the equilibrium point, E0. Y0 is the equilibrium income. So corresponding to R0, you have equilibrium income Y0. So we start with R0 and then we have equilibrium income Y0. Now we increase R from R0 to R1. Okay, what will happen? Because rate of interest and demand for money, they are negatively associated, so the demand curve will shift rightward. Sorry, shift leftward like this. There will be a lowering of demand. So the new equilibrium is at E1 and the income is at Y1. So corresponding to a higher value of R, there will be a higher value of Y. If you join those 2 points, then you will get the LF curve. You just use any one of them. Maybe, I mean, conventionally use we use the graph which we have used in the previous slide, but you can use this graph also. You don't have to do both of them. So use any of them, any one of them, and then try to derive the LM curve. It's simple.